I'm Gregory Donovan, and I teach in the English department here at VCU. As some of you may know, the VCU Department of English recently lost a student in its creative writing MFA program. In recognition of that loss, before we begin our celebration this evening, we would like to take a moment of silence to recognize the passing of our student, Bennett Nyberg. Thank you. Take a drink of water. This evening, we celebrate the awarding of the Levis Reading Prize to Leila Chatti, which is the culmination of a year-long judging process to celebrate the most outstanding first or second poetry collection published in a previous calendar year. The way it works is that graduate students in our MFA program in creative writing read the submitted books and select a group of finalists who then go into the next round where the final decision is made by the VCU creative writing faculty. In that way, this is a community process, and it would not be possible without the participation of the graduate students in our program who deserve our praise and gratitude for their participation. And I should especially recognize last year's Levis Prize coordinator, Colin Bales, who supervised the judging, and this year's Levis Prize coordinator, Brandon Young, who has undertaken the same task. And in addition, Brandon has helped to provide a great deal of the background work required to publicize and to organize this evening. Let's applaud them all. This prize, named for Larry Levis, serves as a living memorial to his superb poetry and to his enduring influence on an ever-growing and broad range of American poets. It is my privilege each year to remember him on this occasion by speaking briefly about some aspect of his writing and his life. Just before that, though, I want to thank our sponsors. We have the wonderful sponsorship of the Cabell Library, as well as the English Department, the College of Humanities and Sciences, and VCU Barnes and Noble. Without that sponsorship, we couldn't have the evening. So let me talk with you a little bit about Larry Levis, who is my friend and colleague. It's true that Larry Levis often did write about death and mortality, creating some of the most remarkable and surprising elegies ever, and even once writing a poem titled "The Morning After My Death," which he published in his second poetry collection titled "The Afterlife" in 1977, a poem he wrote at the ripe old age of not yet 30. This is how it goes. My body is a white thing in the sun now. It is not ashamed of itself, not anymore, because today is the morning after my death. How little I have to say, how little desire I have to say it. At the end of that opening stanza from the poem, you certainly feel a great sense of melancholy, while simultaneously you have the urge to laugh. Of course, you have little to say, you want to reply. You're dead. Naturally, can't say a thing. And that exquisite tension between polar opposites being woven together is a characteristic complexity in the work and in the man. Everyone who knew Larry Levis well would immediately want to assure anyone among his readers who might be tempted to think he had some sort of depressive death wish that in fact, he was not only a seriously brilliant, incisive, and extremely well-read conversationalist, but he also was a warm, exceptionally generous, and very funny fellow. His disciplined commitment to his writing, which came before all else in his life, was balanced against his love of the absurd and the always tempting urge, apparently, to be a wicked and witty outlaw. What is sometimes less clear to those who loved his writing and even to those who loved his friendship is that the frank and at times brutal honesty of his poetry was balanced against a sense of the profound mystery and wonder that infuses his work with a kind of awestruck admiration for the miraculous nature of the everyday, that familiar world of work and survival, which was a given in his childhood background as a Catholic altar boy who worked alongside Mexican and Mexican-American field hands in his father's orchards and vineyards in the Central Valley of California. That ability to bring opposing forces together into what was not only a danse macabre awareness of death lurking nearby, but also a dazzling ballet of virtuosity in language, striking phrasing, and in storytelling that would increasingly become a dominant characteristic of the poems of his later books, including, for example, the two interrelated poems to a Wren on Calvary from his collection, The Widening Spell of the Leaves, and the poem returning as an invisible wren to the world from the posthumous poetry collection, Elegy, that Levis was at the point of completing when he met his death here in Richmond. Isn't that an interesting phrase? Met his death, as if he was walking along suddenly and, well, hello there, death, there you are. I hadn't thought to run into you quite so soon. He did die way too young. In the latter poem, the one with the invisible wren, it's revealed that once there was a poem, I'm quoting, no one read it, and the poem grew wise. And ultimately, the poem took the shape of a wren you could look through like a window and see all the bitterness of the world in the long line of shoulders and faces bending over the gleaming machined parts that passed before them. When I first read that poem, I was struck by that wren you could look through like a lens. And now, when I look out the window of the cottage nestled among the trees where I live, and I see a wren hopping along the top of the split rail fence there, I'm always reminded of these two wren poems by Levis. And I wonder again, why he chose to think of such a small bird, one the size of a small gray mouse, a bird that might be easily overlooked among other showier birds, as the one that could be used as a lens through which to see the world in a way that transforms it because of the grace and ferocity of that little bird. Yet it somehow seems characteristic of Levis, who, like James Wright or Pablo Neruda before him, sought out the heroic and the everyday in the image of the laborer bending over an assembly line. And it's the other Wren poem, the one set on Calvary, or as it's called in the Aramaic, Golgotha, both signifying a skull, that is, the skull-shaped hill just outside the walls of Jerusalem. That poem is the main focus of my little talk tonight, since it combines not only those opposing forces of sadness and humor that I mentioned before, but also weaves into itself a set of iconic religious images that are familiar and essential. In that specific way, Larry Levis's poem has a kinship with the work of Leila Chatti, since her poetry often features a similarly intense combination of vital mysteries, death-haunted sadness, gallows humor, and the solace as well as the disturbance that religion provides. Into a Wren on Calvary, we find the remarkable in the unremarkable Wren, in the nothing that all wrens meant. And yet, the poem's first line tells us in solemn tones that it is the unremarkable that will last. In a work that in part functions as an indictment of all sorts of human activity and altitudes, that poem starts with its epigraph from the infamous brawler and prankster, priest, murderer, and thief, who also happened to be the greatest of the French poets of the late medieval age, Francois Villon, an outrageous and brilliant character with whose rebellious and sardonic spirit Levis clearly identified, since he mentions Villon in several of his own most memorable poems. And so it begins. Prince Jesus, crush those bastards, in what must be a free translation from Villon's most famous work, The Grand Testament, in which Villon bequeathed his worldly and otherworldly possessions, sometimes real, but mostly imagined, to all the people he had known, sometimes leaving a few with touching poems about unrequited love, yet more often bequeathing them horrible punishments, satirical non-existent objects, and terrible deaths. It is in that complex spirit that this poem is written, sometimes including a joke or two, perhaps obscured, as when he mentions cavalry in a poem set on Calvary. I always try to spell them the wrong way. I always get them mixed up. And the spell checker does it for you. If you don't do it, it tries to make you change the spelling. So, it is in that complex spirit again that this poem is written. So, the odd thing too is that when Larry Levis begins a poem whose central figure, according to the title, is the Wren, by describing a painting by the Dutch artist Bruegel, in which the Wren does not appear, it's another one of those jokes, because Bruegel has hidden the bird in camouflage, while other birds appear to pluck the eyes from the faces of executed thieves. Perhaps this refers to Bruegel's painting, The Procession to Calvary, in which Christ is shown as an insignificant figure, hardly visible among the sprawl of the enormous surrounding crowds of gawping and ghoulishly enthusiastic spectators. Later, when the Wren actually does appear in the poem, it is already dead and infested with lice, which have created within the Wren's body an altar whose congregation is so lively, the narrator, presumably Levis himself, is forced to drop it from his hand. And yet he and his hand have been transformed by the experience, changed for a moment by a thing so common. Once again, a discovery of the miraculous in the unremarkable. And the effect is, as the first line promised, lasting, so that no feeding on the dead in the wake of Calvary or kings changed it. Nevertheless, in the end, it swerved away. And then it comes to seem irrelevant. And we see the tucked claws of the dead Wren, which clutched emptiness like a stick. The vicious argument of the couple who appear in the poem becomes interlinked with the crucifixion of the petty thieves and of Christ in the painting, and are then interlinked with the crucifixion of the petty thieves and of Christ in the painting, and in the biblical story as well, as in the historical and legendary accounts of the punishments and persecutions in ancient Rome of Christians and others considered to be dangerous rebels and criminals. Such is the story that after the Spartacus slave revolt, maybe you remember the movie, Kirk Douglas, I Am Spartacus, After the Spartacus slave revolt, slaves were nailed to crosses along a 100-mile stretch of the Appian Way, remaining there, the story goes, until their bones were picked clean by vultures. It is likely this image with which Levis ends his poem, the man in a cart seeking to escape, yet like the Wren on Calvary, forced to become a witness to atrocity and the shocking everydayness of it, as its significance and meaning slowly becomes another vanishing emptiness, like the breath of the horse escaping into the cold air and vanishing. While that sight seems to amaze the horse, the man slumped behind it only stares at the swishing tail, unable to feel anything anymore. And with that introduction, which I hope may prepare you a bit to hear this poem by Larry Levis, a work that discovers the miraculous in the everyday atrocities that surround us, I offer that poem to you as a way of recalling his spirit in this celebration of remembrance and of honoring the art of poetry itself. To a Wren on Calvary, Prince Jesus crushed those bastards, Francois Villon, Grand Testament. It is the unremarkable that will last, as in Bruegel's Camouflage, where the wrens withheld, while elsewhere on a hill, small hawks are the other birds, are busily unraveling eyelashes and pupils from sunburned thieves outstretched on scaffolds, their last vision obscured by wings, then broken entered. I cannot tell whether their blood spurts or just spills. Their faces are wings and their bodies are uncovered. The twittering they hear is the final trespass. And all later luxuries, the half-dressed neighbor couple shouting insults at each other just beyond her bra on a cluttered windowsill, then ceasing it when a door was slammed to emphasize, like trouble, the quiet flowing into things, then spreading its wake from the child's toy left out on the lawn to the broken treatise of jet trails drifting above, seem keel scrapes on the shores of some enlarging mistake, a wrong so wide no one can speak of it now in the town that had once seemed like its supporting factories that manufactured poems and weaponry, like such a good idea. And wasn't it everyone's? Wasn't the sad pleasure of assembly lines a replica of the Wren's perfect camouflage self-sufficiency and of its refusal even to be pretty, surviving in a plumage dull enough to blend in with a hemline of smoke, sky, and a serene indifference? The dead wren I found on a gravel drive one morning, all beige above and off-white underneath, the body lighter, no more than a vacant tent of oily feathers stretched, blent, and lacquered shut against the world, was a world I couldn't touch. And in his skull, a snow of lice had set up such an altar, the congregation spreading from the tongue to round, bare sills that had been its eyes, I let it drop. My hand changed for a moment by a thing so common, it was never once distracted from the nothing all wrens meant, the one feather on the road. No feeding in the wake of Calvary or kings changed it. Even in the end, it swerved away and made the abrupt riddle all things come to seem irrelevant. The tucked claws clutched emptiness like a stick. And if death whispered as always in the language of curling leaves, or a later one that makes us stranger, don't you come near me, motherfucker. If the tang of metal and slang made the new world fertile, still, as they resumed their quarrel in the quiet air, I could hear the species cheep in what they said until their voices rose, until the sound of a slap erased the world, and the woman, in a music stripped of all prayer, began sobbing, and the man became bystander, cried, "Oh, Jesus." In the sky, the first stars were already faint and timeless. But what could they matter to that boy, blent to no choir, who saw at last the clean wings of indifferent hunger and despair? Around him, the other petty thieves, with arms outstretched and eyes pecked out by birds, reclined, fastened forever to scaffolds which gradually would cover an empire's hills and line its roads as far as anyone escaping in a cart could see, his swerving mind on the dark brimming up in everything, the reins going slack in his hand as the cart slows and stops, and the horse sees its own breath go out onto the cold air and gazes after the off-white plume and seems amazed by it, by its breath, by everything. But the man slumped behind it, dangling a lost nail between his lips, only stares at the swishing tail, at each white breath going out, thinning and then vanishing. For he has grown tired of amazing things. And that was Levis. Now it is my additional privilege to introduce the star of this evening, the winner of the 24th Annual Levis Reading Prize for Deluge, the deeply engaging, formally inventive, and brilliantly written poetry collection by Leila Chatti. This is her first full-length poetry collection, published in 2020 by Copper Canyon Press. And as all of us know who had books published during the pandemic, it put on hold a great many of the usual ways to bring a book to public attention, and things were made quite difficult in that regard. So it's a special joy to be able to bring this wonderful book to your attention with this celebration. Leila Chatti has already won many awards for her work, including grants from the NEA, the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund, and the Helen Wurlitzer Foundation, as well as numerous fellowships and scholarships, including those from the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, the Wisconsin Institute for Creative Writing, the Frost Place Conference on Poetry, the Key West Literary Seminars, Dickinson House, and Cleveland State University, where she was the inaugural Ennisfield Wolf Fellow in Writing and Publishing. She now teaches at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she has been appointed as the Mendota Lecturer in Poetry. Leila Chatti is a Tunisian-American dual citizen, born of a Catholic mother and a Muslim father, and she draws on the rich complexity of her background in highly effective ways in her book, which includes poignant epigraphs quoting from both the Quran and the Bible, engaging with the religious symbolism and concepts they provide, as well as featuring the frequent appearance of the Virgin Mary, who is not only a sacred figure in Christianity, but she is an exalted figure in Islam as well, where she is notably mentioned in the Quran some 70 times and identified as the greatest among all women. And Chatti's often visionary as well as frequently surprising poems, unusual in form as well as in content. You may find Mary appearing in an unexpected place or seen from an exceptional perspective, as in the poem Mary in the Waiting Room at the gynecologist's office, where Mary is nervous and uncertain about a decision she is making. Or in the book's opening poem, Confession, which lets us know from the very start that the narrator is going to take up an unusually familiar and empathetic attitude toward the sacred figure of the Virgin Mary, who is not distant, but is brought close, as she admits that, truth be told, I like Mary a little better when I imagine her like this, crouched and cursing, a boy god pushing on her cervix, as a woman with a body ordinary and so like mine. The book offers exceptionally intimate and striking occasions for new ways at looking at familiar aspects of the lives and the burdens of women, all of them viewed through a lens that is clearly feminist, as well as enriched with the sort of philosophical and moral questions inescapably raised by a strongly religious background, especially perhaps for a woman born in Oakland, California, and raised in Michigan. The book's central drama is brought on by a health crisis, which Leila Chatti unexpectedly faced in her 22nd year, a sudden bursting forth like a dam or a thundercloud, which came on with the force of an annunciation that created a link between her life and the life of Mary and the lives of all women. And I will let her inform all of you about all that and delight you with her poetry. Leila Chatti.
I feel like I'm going to crack this open because I'm sure I need it at some point. Wow, I can't believe I'm seeing real faces right now. Thank you all for being here. This is really a little surreal. Thank you for having me. Thank you for reading my book. As Greg mentioned, my book came out during the pandemic, in the beginning of the pandemic. I was on my way to AWP when the news sort of broke that our world was going to be changing, and I was deeply, deeply panicked. And it has changed. So it feels very strange just to be standing here now. This has not happened to me with this book. So I'm deeply honored and very grateful, really personally, as well as professionally. This is a real blessing to be here with you all. I'm going to put a timer so I make sure I don't bore you all too much. But despite what my last name looks like it says, I'm not particularly chatty during readings. I usually kind of go straight through. I hope that's okay, but I'm very happy to chat afterwards. Yeah, this is a book about illness, and I used to say that it's about illness that that took place in my early 20s, but I've been trying to be more honest, and in that honesty, it's a chronic illness. And I most recently had surgery last month, beginning of last month. So it's something that feels still very close to me. And I'm still figuring out all these things, but this is the first bit that I figured out. Okay. I'm going to start with the first poem. Confession. Oh, I wish I had died before this and was in oblivion, forgotten. Mary giving birth, the Holy Quran. Truth be told, I like Mary a little better when I imagine her like this, crouched and cursing, a boy God pushing on her cervix. I like remembering she had a cervix, her body ordinary and so like mine. Girl sweat lacing rivulets like veins in the sand. Her small hands on her knees, not doves, but hands, gripping, a palm pressed to her spine, fronds whispering like voyeurs overhead. Oh, Mary, like a god, I too take pleasure in knowing you were not all holy that ache could undo you like a knot. And suffering, I admire this girl who cared for a moment not about God or his plans, but her own distinct life. This fiercer Mary who disappeared if it saved her, who'd howl to hell with salvation if it meant this pain. The blessed adolescent who squatted indignant in a desert, bearing his child like a secret she never wanted to hear. Mubtadiya, which is Arabic for beginner, one who sees blood for the first time. And indeed, appointed over you are keepers, noble and recording. They know whatever you do. The Holy Quran. Hidden in a dim stall as the muezzin called all worshippers to prayer, I touched privately the indelible stain and watched with a nascent sense of kinship the women washing through the interstice of the door, their veils slipping off like water, water spotting their clothes like rain. I thought the thought only children in the pious believe, that I was, just like that, no longer a girl. The blood my summons, blot like a seal, a scarlet membership card slid from my innermost pocket. I was newly 12 and wise enough to be frightened. I had read the book and so understood my own was now opening, alighting onto my shoulders like some ethereal bird flapping briefly immaculate wings, and understood too that I myself engendered the ink with which on its pages my sins would forever be written. Not literally, but this was how I imagined it, metaphor, as the blood brought God's recorders like sharks to me, Menarche a bright flare, a matador's crimson cape. I had not been good all my life, but until this first vermilion drip, I lived unobserved. My sins, not sins, because no one looked. And now, Above, like a lamp suddenly ablaze, God's reproachful eye turned my way, a searchlight eternally searching and seeing and seeing. I was as good as I would ever be. In the dark, the ruddy iris stared back at me. Intake form. Doubled for 6 hours and bleeding, I decide to go to the hospital only when my boyfriend says, "How long? Jesus Christ," then puts me in the car, drives to the hospital. Rate your pain from 0 to 10. 0 being impossible, the impassible God. 10 being Christ pinned like a monarch, who was unlike all others wounded, who did not die to save you in your version of the story, who endured the suffering of the world and everyone in it, and never once asked to go to the hospital. 7 pains, or the pain sevenfold. Pain like the pain of the Blessed Mother in the desert, of the first mother who passed it on like an inheritance, of my mother, her first, on her back, wailing in this hospital. How much blood would you say? What's your best estimate, would you say? Would you say it comes constant or in waves? You stayed in the tub, did you say? Did it soak a tampon, did you say? How many tampons would you say? How quickly would you say? Is this abnormal, would you say? Is this a lot of blood for you, would you say? Is there any chance you're pregnant, would you say? Is it possible this is your period, would you say? When was your last period, would you say? Say, is that your boyfriend? I'm going to ask him some questions, okay? I'm just going to ask him some questions about your bleeding, okay? Just clear some things up, okay? Get a clear picture, okay? Then we'll get you into the hospital. In the 22nd year of my life, in the 12th month, on the 15th day of the month, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. And I caught heaven in a plastic bag, heaven teeming steadily into a bag beneath my jeans. And God forgive me, I think mulberries. And an angel speaks the measured and Odinic language of angels directly to my vein. And I bob in and out of what divulges no horizon. A voice above pronouncing flood and me affirming, yes, a flood. And so one day, I'll say it was. The word came down to me so simply that first day of the spate of the hospital. Mary in the waiting room at the gynecologist's office. She flips the silken page of a Cosmo and sucks on her teeth. I watch her immaculate hands as she scans sex tips and checks again her phone. Her veil hangs loosely, ornaments her shoulders like a fresh drift of snow. It's just us two. Across the room, a water cooler gurgles beneath framed diagrams nailed to the wall. Uterus, fallopian tubes, a vagina opening its deep-throated rose. Mary presses her palm to the heat of her breast, turns to me and says, as if apologizing, "I'm a little nervous." Carefully, she smooths her blue skirt, glances at the ceiling, whispers, "One was enough." In my hand, an empty cup. Mary crosses her legs, fingers the slender chain around her neck. She rubs her thumb against the pendant's tiny face, his miniature arms, permanently splayed. Annunciation. At the bedside, robed in white, a white blaze above, a hum of light like a supernal language, a dove in the dark bell of my threshold, pain peeling like a Sunday, the attending announcing shadow, widening the dove's steely beak, a bit of pressure, a sharp pinch in view on the screen, apparitions, black halos, black seas void of boats or divinity. They are speaking now. They are trying their best to appear human, so I won't startle, leave. But what they have to tell me, I don't want to receive. The word only incarnate once it slipped in her sleep. Mary speaks. And what could I say when he entered? Rude as a dream, bare flame of a man with wings and demands, not his own. I'd been raised a good girl, to house my tongue in my mouth, to be hospitable towards strangers, suspicious of no one. Perhaps I'd have been better off to be wary, but I'd been waiting so long to hear God speak, I hadn't thought to think of what he might tell me. Sarcoma. When the doctor says the word sarcoma, I consider how it might be a nice name for a daughter, that good feminine A, the way parents name their children for all sorts of inappropriate things. Apples, for instance, or the place where the baby was conceived. And I trace my fingers over the barrow of my belly as he speaks, flesh distended beneath the blue tissue I wear for a dress, an ideal grief frock, throwaway. And he says something about life expectancy, but of course I expect my life. So plain I thought nothing would ever take it. And while he explains, I cut my palm around my center, as if comforting a child or covering her ears. Litany while reading scripture in the gynecologic oncology waiting room. And God said, let there be blood. And God said, flood. And God said, good is a woman with fruit in her womb and not in her hand. And God said, sin. And God did not say, forgive. And God said, I will make a stormy wind. And God said, sun, a breath stirring. And God said, highly favored. And God said, condemned. And God said, I will blot out man whom I have created, for I am sorry that I have made them. And God said, listen, and sank a boy in her like a stone. Mother, if you had asked me, 13, what I wanted to be one day, I wouldn't have said it. I wanted, for a long time, to be anything but myself, knew that a soon-to-be woman was the second worst thing in the world after a woman, full stop, and I was heading there fast. I could see it, my breasts rudely nudging into view, their snug caps like the knit caps of infants, rosy colored as a tongue. And how terrifying, the thought of a mouth there rooting and what could be drawn from me that I didn't need. What else skulked in me unseen, stirring in secret vats with milk yet untapped and blood, the strange new wellspring. I was just beginning to understand the possibilities. My body's elusive, independent workings, machineries chugging away in dark chambers, not just left to, but simply their own devices, unknowable and sovereign. What I wanted always to be in control. And I knew this was impossible, just as I knew even then that to be a mother was to be the only permissible form of a woman, the begrudging exception to the rule of our worthlessness. So if you asked me again, 23, I tell you the worst thing you could be is not a woman, but barren, the industry shut down and the parts missing, malformed. And I tell you the shame of it, the feminine failure, its ache, a reminder. At the center, the tumor, ballooning, like hope. Tumor. On the scan, a monochrome nimbus of indiscernible material. My own, of course, but its intentions opaque. Its mouth, not a mouth, but a zero, a cipher, a space indicating a question it will not ask of itself. It requires me, like a child, to do another thing I'd rather not, to speak on its behalf, to determine its name so I might call it by it, so I might be accurate in my address, this precise knowing, something like tenderness, my obsessive attention and ersatz love, and I cannot turn away from it. Unblinking oculus of my center, blank eyes staring from benthic depths. And while I'm at it, it resembles too, I think, a fruit if fruit were buried, a thonic pomegranate, Pompeian fig cocooned, or else the dark countenance of the moon, one of its seas, or the orphan planet of the dead, motherless stone, God of no and never. Portrait of the illness as nightmare. No matter how many times you ring the bell in the bad dark, no one will let you in. You face the fun house with its mirrors on the outside so everyone can see, and everyone looks. You are in your underwear and the room is cold. The doctor's stethoscope pressed to you becomes suddenly a snake. Your heart hisses in its cage. Your heart sputters, a doused flame. You are drowning in your blue paper gown, which recedes in the back like an ocean, your skin a bank of hot sand. The horizon bleeds in the days, and you wander lost in a city of scalpels where everything glitters and pills fade like moons on your tongue. You sidle through sterile labyrinths and piss in a cup. You wait in a room like a chapel or the belly of a beast. Either way, you think something will save you. You believe this the whole fearsome time. Your God comes and he is ordinary and terrible. He confers with the doctors at your kitchen table and tells you to eat your clots round his peas. You want dessert. You want to deceive him, but he, like you, has eyes and uses them. You are grounded in the ground. The pit is a tub and you are washing in your body's black water. You rise like a fever. You writhe on a bed, on a stage, the strings reaching toward heaven. There's a momentary break for everyone else, intermission. They chatter in the lobby. You babble symptoms in a white confessional. You fall from a great height and land on a gurney. You're at the front of a classroom and you are stripped to your bones. The doctor points to your pelvis. You model the tumors. In this light, they look pretty, like jewels. Angel. After a month of asking, suddenly a voice. It says, you deserve that which has happened to you. It says, I see what you do with your long terrain hands. Maundering through the banalities of my life, it follows, speaking as if from a frosty bag of peas in the freezer aisle, speaking while I am on my knees, scrubbing the bathroom floor, trying to love a man. Its speech is disquieting company, but company nonetheless. A TV left on and turned low. It desperately wants my attention, but is polite, which is its defining weakness. Sometimes I catch it stirring out of the corner of my eye, a glint at the end of my cat's whiskers, a spangle on the ceiling of indiscernible source. More often, though, it looks like me, only a little off, like my reflection in the pregnant belly of a spoon. In fact, when I speak to it, I use my own name. I'm not sure if it minds. It repeats instead its refrain. It says, God has plans for you. It says, I didn't say they were good. I pause, take a drink of water, 1 second. And check my time. Okay. Anyone go to Sunday school? Folks, okay, yeah, fellow Sunday schoolers. Hema appears a couple times in this manuscript, and she's not in the Quran, but she's in the Bible. She's the woman with the issue of blood. So this poem's for her. Hema Monarch. I wanted to be a woman until I was. What opened in me brought such pain. I believed finally one day I would die. But it subsided for a while. I remember thinking I was cured. I could go back to being a child. Then the next month, red seed in the morning's bowl, unfurling as it touched the water. Hymen. Second blood, I never knew you. After the first, scoured the bed for your blazoned blot and came up empty. Perhaps I was born without you. A box with no prize inside, a sundae with no cherry on top. God of good girls, God of matrimony, mother state, which I consider a distant country with a discordant tongue. Did you speak with God and conclude I hadn't use for you? Once I was small as your kin, so small and for such a long time, longer than I've lived. I fit inside my mother when she fit inside her mother, and so on and so forth and further. A nest of matrons, me's and a beam, in which to be female is to be something like infinity. And was it determined then what kind of woman I would be? It seems I've always been frightened, little veil, of wedlock's lock clicking shut. The heritable procession of women whispering in the aisle of my pulse, don't do, don't do, don't. And I haven't done. This, the graveman, the grave I've dug with the spade of pleasure. But wanting seal of want, I did want it. Did choose to commit my life's greatest transgression with a benevolent accomplice. And so in the here before, you could say I'm among the spared. What a mess this messlessness of you could have been in any number of lives my size, billowing specters of dresses on a line of possibility, lives in which I am the bridesmaid and you, maidenhead, the bride given away, where I am the acquired property and you, the red ribbon severed in the threshold, I, the purse, and you, the coin tendered. Perhaps no one ever told you, precious emblem of innocence, simulacrum for honor, that some believe you the most important part of me, vital, like a heart a man gets the thrill of bursting where he can see it, that blood is owed to him. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Of a woman, you, the only blood worth anything. Hemmerhuisa. Did she, like me, lose years of nights up at an ungodly hour, washing the sheets? She must have been very tired. She must have been ashamed, waking again to a stain in the bed, still warm like a lover just risen, day spring seeping over the weedy yard outside. She likely had once a husband, but not long, not after. Because no one touched her, she must have touched herself. She must have known a woman could die from living untouched and preferred to be satisfied. Her red hands turning slowly and brightly like fish under a faucet in the back of the quiet, lonesome house. Sometimes I'm sure she thought her life was all right. She ate when available the foods she liked best and moved her chair while reading to the sunniest spot. She presumably prayed for some time, then decided to move on to more fruitful endeavors, like grooming her eyebrows or organizing the kitchen drawer. Always a mess. I'm sure she enjoyed a good joke. Occasionally had trouble with self-esteem, generosity. She was the kind to need and need, like me, endlessly. So when one day that God walked by, all boyish good looks and not looking her way, she didn't for a moment hesitate. She did what I couldn't do. A miracle within reach. She took it. God's will. When a child latches in the hollow of a woman like a leech, it is your will. And two, when the body fails and leaks like bad fruit, it is your will. Once you were clear with your intentions, you left no room for dispute, your voice coming through to Mary like a snake through black water. Now, nightly, my ear toward heaven, a cup catching shadows. If your word is your will, and your will is all, collude with me. Zina. Verily, it was heaven. I couldn't be certain you would allow me admission, so I sought my own in the body of a man. Verily, I mistook him for you, my Lord. I invoked another God, I invoked an other. Before him I prostrated, I proffered myself in oblation, and pleasure coursed through me, angels or an exaltation, aroused from sleep. And each part named, knew itself, and bucked and stamped its feet in praise. And the beast I was was glad. Verily, a woman, the first night of nights, I required a man's flesh to come alive. Everywhere his mouth grazed, I was afflated. And each time he touched me as though making me anew with his own two merciful hands. Annunciation. All night I leak a shadow from the place I first learned shame. All night the milky curve of the moon pressed to the window like an ear. God, I know you are there. You are everywhere. And yet you fixed her in a shaft of light and sent a man who would not touch her, frightened though she was. You were there in the room, as you are here in the room, and the dark through which, I beseech you, the man beside me slumbers messageless, unwinged. All night I listen for you listening. If there is something you need to tell me, God, you must tell it to me yourself. I think I'm going to do something I haven't really done for this ending of this. Let's see. Yeah. There's a very long poem thing at the end of the book, and I wanted to read a little bit from it, if you'll allow me. It's called Awra, which is Arabic. It means nakedness, taboo, that which is prohibited from public view. And it's from the root meaning defectiveness, weakness, imperfection, and blemish. The word has evolved in multiple languages to mean woman. A man who does not know my favorite song opens me like a fig. He has the proper credentials. I have a paper sheet hiked up and my legs spread wide as a wish. My father called it fig. Because of this, I avoid eating them for many years until after I am sick, at which point I begin to seek out any sanguine fruit like kin. As a child, upon first identifying herself in a mirror, begins looking hungrily in any bright pain. Feast on pomegranates, blood oranges, raspberries, cherries, plums. The first time I split the skin to reveal its carmine interior, I blush. I feel I am partaking in something vulgar. Assume implicitly my father meant shame, but never make certain. But then I taste it. It's red meat on my tongue. Its ineffable sweetness. In the dark, I search an Arabic dictionary for vagina by the glow of my phone. Touch and touch to keep it from dimming. But it's irrelevant. The word's missing. Find instead where it should be. Diamond, suffering, to make a god. From the Latin, sheath. Sheath implies weapon. Whose weapon implies a weapon subdued? It could be cancer, the doctor says, but you are very young. Does young mean less likely in this circumstance, I ask? The doctor is exasperated. The doctor is an expert in his field. He sighs so that I'm aware. I am bare, under paper, a bright bulb. I look down. My feet touch at the toes like a child's. We're children, we're easily convinced. Sunday's sister teaches us we are sweet, our sweets, bonbons, good goods unless we're unwrapped or, heaven forbid, kissed. Who wants a sucker that's already been licked? Pudendum, a person's external genital organs, especially the external genitalia of a woman. Latin, translated literally as thing to be ashamed of, from the root meaning to punish. The idea of disease as punishment yielded the idea a disease could be a particularly appropriate and just punishment. The idea of the disease yielded the idea, the disease. To the woman, he said, I will greatly multiply your pain. In pain, your desire will rule over you. Or this is how I remember it. Some things get damaged when handed down. Some things get damaged when handled. I am handled by so many men, I begin to believe myself a thing, myself something damaged. When men tell me things, I listen. It's polite, and I am a woman, and this a part of the terms. You learn. When the word of God came down, it came down to a man. I will not accuse God of lacking imagination, but I will set the accusation down where he can see it. Nevertheless, I take great care to respect the word and words generally, the only place I have ever encountered God, thus something of a sanctuary. Like a child teasing, he refuses to show himself to me, and so I must keep calling, keep seeking. I am good, or at least I follow rules. Because I am bleeding, for 2 years I do not touch the word of God, do not enter his house, do not sing his favorite songs, by which I mean pray. I understand the blood as exile and cry out from the island it makes of me. I cry out in the way I am allowed, which is in puling, plaintive sounds. Why, O Lord, have you punished me? Etc., etc. I also distract myself with language, as though I might find God in the lacunae between letters, in the ink of the letters themselves. Pain does not have a language, but God is where, in language, pain grew from punishment, like a woman from a rib. What else can you call it but divine, the way ill stems from evil's root, patient from suffering, blessing and blood on the same dark vine. Sister says God sees all, says God sees all of us in every room, in every house, in every hour we enter, says even in darkness God sees. In darkness he is the light that illumes, so cover yourself even when alone, for God is with you, God who knows what your own self whispers to you, God closer than your jugular vein. In Arabic, blood becomes dam, so with my 2 tongues, I conjure both blood and its obstacle. A poet says, repent means the pain again. Sister says, once you touch, he knows, and your hands can never be clean. So what do I do with this ache, my filth, and my hands, stained as they are? My hands rising instinctive in the morning like birds, wild with impertinent praise. My hair awrat, so I covered it. My skin awrat, so I covered it. The sound of my voice awrat, so I swallowed it. The sound of my feet awrat, so I stood so still I vanished, just to be sure. What purpose now, if I was made to worship you and you forbid me worship? I'm anxious as the moon gnawing through a day's haze to be seen. My effort confuses. Praying as a child, I moved as my father moved, my lips contorting into the suggestion of words with nothing said, while in my head, a terrible boredom. As I was taught, tapped my finger against my knee, believed this sanctioned impatience. Now chastened, now I ablute and am never clean. I prostrate to pain and think it you. Is it true Mariam stood and worshiped each day until her ankles swelled as if with pride and her feet festered and wept with blood? I don't understand your distinctions. I've learned the words. Let me put them to use. The doctor speaks to me as I am told one day a husband might. I am always supine, undressed. He is always standing across the room, impatiently explaining something. It's a certain kind of intimacy. We talk briefly about the usual things. How I feel, what he thinks about his work, which is, of course, my body. My body, the crux of the relationship. Women, being socialized to attend more to their physical appearance, are more likely than men to have healthcare providers assume they are not in pain if they look more physically attractive. And what of looking? If a man looks long enough, a woman becomes something else. A novelty, a gimcrack. And God looks, and his angels, a canary on each shoulder. But this is true of anyone. And the sunbreak searing the clouds is not God's eye. And the rustle outside my bedroom window at dusk is not God peering in. Yet God watches, unfailing. What does he learn by watching that he does not already know? And what of the doctors looking? Having looked so long, I think them gods. And anyway, I can't demand they avert their gaze. The lookings, what will save me? Pressed, the belly resists. The doctor pushes again, 2 fingers, tender. Holds a golf ball, says, one's this size. Won't say the other. A man sang once inside, tell me if it hurts. A man saying, just a little pressure. Having a tumor generally arouses some feelings of shame. Far from revealing anything spiritual, it reveals that the body is all too woefully just the body. A boy pressing me. A boy pressing me into the mattress like his shadow. I, his shadow. My body, irrelevant. My body, the whole point. My body between us like an argument, but I uttered no argument. My limbs shadows, resistless. When he moved, I moved with him. Shadow of a boy. Pressing my head. A boy pressing my hands above my head. A boy pressing, come on. A boy pressing just a little bit. Pressing just a little bit on my body, my hands, my head. Just a little bit of pressure until met with resistance. Just a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more. The disease is often experienced as a form of demonic possession. Tumors are malignant or benign, like forces. A little pressure, 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 a little pressure. A woman writes, cancer is a demonic pregnancy. Because life is grotesque and absurd, the doctor uses a fetal chart to track my tumor's growth. Thus, the produce aisle engenders dread. I yield a kumquat within me, a Meyer lemon, an heirloom purple as a fist. 10 weeks, 13, 20. Your baby is just beginning to kick. Your baby pendiculating. Your baby, if a girl, has now eggs and a womb of her own. I know something grows within me, without eyes, without fingers, a beast without intention or a mouth to speak it, a creature with no breath blown in. In Arabic, to say fetus, ineluctably, you summon jinn. And you, flower of pain, offer me other possibilities. Become motherhood. In the Quran, when Mary gives birth, it is not clinical. The sun bearing down on her like an animal, 1,000 puny suns running like yolks and globules of sweat. Beneath her, her bared milky thighs and clots of black sand. This, what I cannot look away from. The one who is most clean, unclean, her encarmined hellward crown, slicked as if with lust, her mouth opening to howl that curse, and a moment where she is a wretched, two-headed creature, then after offal of God's will sloughed as if onto an abattoir's floor, and I stare not to humiliate her, but for reassurance that one can truly suffer, can bleed and bleed as if gutted by the blade of God's command, and still be loved by God. And more importantly, love him back. When trying to ascertain a name for my condition, not the illness, but the subsequent obsession with the mother of sorrows, Sanctissima, star of the sea, I collect words like pearls, roll them over my tongue, relish the sounds they make, knowing they do not serve me. Mariolatry, parthenolatry, worship of the Virgin Mary, of virgins collectively. It's not worship that I feel, wanting to slip into a new skin, like slipping into a bed with fresh, cool sheets. Hyperdulia, veneration of the Virgin Mary as the holiest of creatures. Broken down becomes something like heavenly slave. But what I like best is not her adolescent acquiescence or established chastity, not her being plucked by God's hand like a daisy from all others in the field, but her overlooked humanness, her womanness. I probe the image of the Blessed Mother as often I have dissected pictures of my own, parsing her as if to possess her, deciding what of hers is mine. This, what interests me, the body, her body, obscured. Emissary of the feminine, flanked by gods like men and men of God, covered like a wound. Of her flesh, only her heart, burning within view. Cynosure, none such. In the book, the only woman named, and to be named is to be defined, corporeal, a beast of worth, she the one-bodied amid a featureless female haze, my adoration preordained. In the beginning, as a child, I didn't know she herself was a child, a sister I would eternally be placed beside, favored girl, exemplar of the lesser sex, and found lacking. And now, a woman all my life eclipsed, I cannot bring myself to resent her, ingenue who yielded to God's impossible request. How could she have uttered anything but yes? Woman, 9/10 of desire, man's equal only when she makes her life a perpetual offering. The devil's gateway, the unsealer of that forbidden tree, first deserter of the divine law, tribulation, hell's majority, more shameless and false, more readily deceived and more mindful of injury, more watchful, more idle, on the whole less excitable. A certain lack of qualities, a misbegotten man, defective and misbegotten, weak, typically sick, changeable, inconstant, the relative being, sex, absolute sex, holy in her womb, a pain that never goes away. Black bag of desire, sweet weight, singing like a schoolgirl, chalice, teacup, vessel, animal within an animal, she-ram, bed of death, womb black, blackening as a snake you coil, and as a serpent you hiss, and as a lion you roar, and as a lamb lie down. 2 years draped in black trail behind me like a cortege, suited for a death that didn't come. My prolonged, equivocal mourning. It takes time to be convinced when I am well that I am well. I dress in umbrage as if still under the shadow of a very tall tree. But then I emerge, vernal, into the world of brightness, tentatively allow myself my favorite imbrewable hues, coquelicot, goldenrod, cornflower, lilac. And despite knowing what it's known, my body resumes its efforts toward blooming. When the blood comes, it drops lightly on my gusset like a petal. It is the season of strawberries. I'm going to finish with one short poem. Thank you all so much for being here and listening. This poem is called Exegesis. I bled. God didn't want to hear about it. He said unclean, and so it was. He said it is harm, and so it was. Want to hear about it? He said unclean. Once a woman wanted, so he did her harm. And so it was first conceived. A woman suffering because a woman wanted. So he said, cursed. And then he said, blessed. The woman chose to suffer, conceived a God, though she never knew a man. And God knows best. If he calls a curse a blessing, then so it is. And he said she was clean. She never knew a man. I've known men, but never a God that bled and lived. But I did. Thank you.
maybe you didn't hear me. Leila will be happy to sign books over there. And thank you so much for coming.